Hi, I tend to do perspective in a very simple way. I've found out how to really speed up my perspective process by doing years of character layout on the Simpsons show. And once I got down my little method, um, I was able to really work with perspective very quickly. And I wanted to share how I went about doing that so that it's almost a no-brainer kind of perspective work. That's what this video is going to be about. Hi, my name is Luis Escobar. I'm a storyboard artist on the Simpsons television show. I've been working on the show for over 20 years now, and I'm here to empower you. One of the jobs that I had during for the Simpsons before I got into storyboarding was character layout, and character layout is in particular composing the final shots the way they're going to be shown on TV, and then doing all the acting, all the emoting, kind of like doing basically doing the animation, but the main job of a character layout artist was making sure that the staging and the perspective and the compositions were working as solid as possible so that the characters can work within the space. So what I did was I created a perspective sheet which just had one vanishing point on one end, one vanishing point on the other end, with a horizon line on both, and then I would just put vanishing points. Lines coming off of the vanishing points so that they merged. So I'm gonna do that now, and I'm gonna show you a digital way of doing it. But the way that I did it on paper was just all on one sheet of 11 by 17 paper, and then I'll show you how to use it. So the first thing I would do in my perspective grid was to simply create a straight line for the horizon line. And actually, let me see if I can't make this even brighter, because for some reason this is very light. Oh, that's why. Yeah, that's better. So that would be my starting off point. And then I would go in and put in vanishing points like this. Okay, so this would be my sheet of 11 by 17 paper. Now I'm doing this digital. It's going to be even easier doing it digital, but um, on paper, this is essentially the same thing. Now that I had this, I would actually get another pencil, a different colored uh, colored pencil, and I would create, and I would get my ruler, and I would just go straight to this horizon point, this vanishing point like this. And I'm not measuring out, I'm not trying to be perfect. I am just simply creating straight lines as if they were coming out of this vanishing point. And I did this using a ruler on paper. This is essentially the exact same thing I did. Now, I don't have to do this with this program, Manga Studio, because it actually comes with a perspective grid, which is really handy. But if I'm using programs like Photoshop that don't come with this handy dandy perspective grid, I actually create a digital perspective grid myself like this. And I'm a little off here. I'm missing. So I'm just looking for areas where there's too much of a gap, because the idea here is to make as many as possible, as many lines as possible to help out here. Okay, there we go. Oops, maybe we need one more here. Okay, so once I had this done, then I would do, yep, the other side. However, and I would usually just use a regular pencil for, the horizon line would be red, so I knew so it would stick out, so I knew exactly where the horizon line is. The horizon line is that would be very important. So again, I would put it in red, and then this side I would do in black with a regular pencil, and then the other side I would do with a regular pencil as well. Because this is digital, I don't have to do this twice. All I have to do is flop this. And line it up to this horizon, to this vanishing point here. There. Ta-da! So that would be the grid that I would do. So it would look like this. And so it would be on a big sheet of paper. If you want, you could do this digitally and then print it out. That would be fine too. Okay, so the question that always comes up is, but Luis, if you've got this, why wouldn't every single perspective look wrong? Because it would just be the same vanishing points all the time. Don't vanishing points tend to fluctuate between their spaces and stuff like that? I'm glad you asked that question, because that's exactly what you will almost never use these two vanishing points exactly as far away from each other as they are in this sheet. What you will do is you will rough out your comp, and then you will use only one vanishing point. Well, it's getting really complicated to explain something that I could actually show you. So let me show you how this would work. So let me just create a folder. Oh, did I just merge these? Actually, let me insert this into a folder. All of these into a folder. Call this perspective grid. Okie doke. The reason I didn't want to merge all this stuff is just in case I needed the option of changing, say, this into a different color, so that you know, say I want this to be green, so that I can tell these two apart. This is something that I tend to do in the digital. I didn't have to do it on regular pen when I was doing it on pencil. But it's helpful sometimes to differentiate which lines are what, because it gets kind of a little bit confusing. So if I have one that's green and one that's blue, it's easier to understand which side is what, or and whatever. So anyway, let's work this out. So let's say that okay, so usually what I do is I don't work out the perspective when I'm doing a comp. When I'm just roughing something out and I don't know what the perspective is, I usually don't worry about it. I kind of eyeball the perspective. So let's say, zoom in here. I have this, let's say I have a panel. And let's do a full body shot of a few people. So I've got let's say I got a character here going, hey, what's going on? It's going to be like really quick little stick figure people. He's like, you told me you were taking care of my house. Let's move him. I'm just working with shapes here, so I don't really know what I'm doing. Let's say that this guy is an extreme foreground. Going, what? Just trying to add depth. Let's have this guy actually look at the guy. That's not cool, man. It's not cool. This guy's here. So he's mad at this guy because his house is on fire. And I guess he lives in a log cabin or something in the woods. Let's make sure that this is clear and it's not. This guy could overlap the house. And there's trees and stuff. Okay. Let me just get rid of that actually. This is too distracting. So it's really, really simple. Okay, so we've got a comp like this, where there's this guy, and he's mad at this other guy going, hey, man, you're taking care of my house, and now my hand's on fire. You totally ruined my house. And so notice I didn't really think about where's the horizon line, where's the perspective. In fact, I'm still messing with these things. Oops. I should just merge these. Trying to get the comp right. I don't think this is right actually. Let me. I think this guy needs to be higher. This is just from experience. You will see why I think that. Soon. In fact, because this is getting too cramped, I should probably increase the frame. So this is usually how I work anyway, where if I'm roughing something out and I don't exactly know what the when I'm roughing something out. So this is how I usually work when I'm roughing something out, and I usually don't know what it ought to look like. I mess around with it. I play around with it. This is, you could imagine, just imagine this. Just assume this is the thumbnail that I'll eventually flesh out later. Now, see, because there's all these things were overlapping. Now I could clear the house. Now the guy can say, hey, what happened to my house? Now you can see the house. You can see this guy, his entire body. He's not getting cut off. We could see more smoke and billowing, and it's not good. We can add some details back here now. This is just clouds and mountains. Maybe add a rock, a few rocks in here. Hey man, my house is on fire. Okay. So we've got these characters doing this and doing that, and he's kind of upset. He's like, oh, sorry, dude. Totally jacked your house. All right. So let's say we've got a comp. You saw how I came up with it. I'm not thinking perspective and all this stuff. I'm just putting shapes on the paper. I have this shape here. I got this shape here. This shape is bigger than this shape, which is big, and this shape is bigger still. Just adding depth, so we have this kind of triangle going on here, and in here, and this guy's pointing in here, so there's this going on. So that's how I think. I don't think perspective. I think composition. I think graphic shapes. I think large versus small, depth, that sort of thing. I'm not thinking perspective. Okay, now that I've got something that I enjoy, a shot that I think is working, this is when I use the grid to figure out where the horizon line is, where the ground plane is, how am I going to use the perspective, etc., etc. So the very first thing we need to do is figure out what the horizon line is. So let's turn on the perspective. Oh, and in order to do this, actually, let me change the color of this comp because we're using red and all this other stuff. So let's make it black. And let's straighten it up a little bit because it's a little crooked. All right, now let's introduce the perspective grid. So we have the perspective grid, and the very first thing we need to do, I'm going to save this just in case something crashes. Right. Is either move the perspective grid, or in this case, maybe just move this drawing. And we're going to assume that these two guys are exactly the same size. So if they were standing next to each other, every single part of the character's proportions are exactly the same. They're as tall as each other. Their body shapes are the same type. The length of their legs are the same, etc. So the rule is that, and I'm not paying attention to these vanishing points right now. I'm only paying attention to the red. The rule is that any part of a character that crosses the horizon line, where the horizon line crosses on a certain character, the horizon line ought to cross exactly in the same place on a character that is exactly the same size. So if the horizon line is crossing on this guy's eyes, then the horizon line should cross this guy's eyes, but they're not. If it's crossing his neck, it should be crossing the neck of this guy. Look at that, it does. So this is actually where the horizon line is. So if the top of his head is crossing the horizon line, it should be crossing the horizon line on this guy's top of his head, but it's not. So we have just discovered where the horizon line is. And the horizon line is right here, because it's crossing this character and this character, who are exactly the same size, in the exact same spot. Okay, now that we know where the horizon line is, what we do is we draw it. Like if you have a sheet of paper and you have so for example, if you were doing this on a regular sheet of paper, you would have your perspective grid over a light table, a light box, where the light is shining through, and you have your grid on the table, kind of like maybe taped to the table, and then you have your drawing, and you would do that, and you move it around until you find that spot where the horizon line is. And when you do, then you just use removable tape and tape your drawing, and then you draw the horizon line into your drawing. Ta-da! Whoops. This should have been red. Okay. So now we have the horizon line in the drawing. Rough, you know? Or on a separate sheet of paper, you could also like use tracing paper and then do that. And you just put register lines. But usually I tend to really lightly put the horizon line into my drawing. And then now comes the other part. Now where are the vanishing points? Because we can use these where they are, but it may not be where we want them to be. So, for example, this house that I drew is obviously not going to this horizon, to this vanishing point over here. So what we do is, now that we've got this drawing, and I'm going to put these in a folder so that I can move them all at once, as if it's one drawing. Now that we have this drawing with a horizon line, we make sure that wherever we move the drawing, the horizon line always lines up to the one on the grid. So what we're looking for is a vanishing point for this particular rough house. And we use these lines to check, see? And it looks like this would be the place. Maybe if we're using these. But then there's these rough drawings, and this is actually a little bit less extreme. And I like it less extreme, so let's use the bottom lines, because it's rough. It's rough. It's not an absolute. Look how much further it is if I was to use the bottom lines as the guide instead. I think that's okay. I kind of like it off screen. Maybe I will do a little bit of half in between both of these. So it's still off screen. All right, so now that I've got that done, I will, what I would do when I had a sheet of paper, I would then go in and very lightly copy the perspective lines. With a ruler. I would just add them in there. I'm doing a bit of a sloppy job, but I think you're going to get the idea. Okay. So now this this drawing has this going on. So I already have the perspective really quick. I didn't have to like do a whole lot of rigmarole. I just moved the drawing around on the grid. Okay, so we've got one vanishing point, but we want this to be a 2-point perspective. So we do exactly the same thing with the second vanishing point, and then I want to see. So these lines are over here. You know what? I like where this is. I like that. I like what these lines look like from here. And this happens a lot. Sometimes that's just it works out. If I didn't, I would. But okay, well, let's say I didn't. I didn't like it. Let's say I wanted this to be even further. Let's say that's where I want the vanishing point to be. Well, guess what? It's off the paper. So instead, well, in if I was using a piece of paper, like an actual piece of paper, and it went off, then I would still use the ruler and I would just keep going. But since this is digital and I don't want to do anything with the, well, it'll be easier for me to just move this perspective grid over instead. I was going to say I was going to increase the size of the canvas just to do that, but then that's a bit annoying. So instead, let's say that this is where I wanted the perspective grid, the vanishing point to be, is just way off screen. So, but hey, guess what? I still have these green guides still here. So and this is usually where I use two different colored pencils so that I can tell the difference. So I just continue the lines from where they were here in the perspective grid. And in cases like this where I still want something in here, I just kind of guess, like a middle line. But I'm still trying to follow these green lines, make sure that these line up these green lines here like this. And then if I wanted middle ones, I would just kind of eyeball like an in-between. So let me just return this perspective grid back to where it should be. Okay. And so here we have the drawing and the perspective where it ought to be. So we have the horizon line right here. We have this vanishing point here, all the grids for this vanishing point. We have all the grids for that vanishing point. And then it's just a matter of going over the drawing and cleaning it up and making it look nice. So if I'm gonna, you know, create the frame, so if you know, you do a nice cleanup drawing. I don't know why these. Anyway, I was going to say, I don't know why these are not working, but all right. Let's say that's an actual nice line. And then, yeah. And then I would start really solidifying these characters. And I am not being pretty about this, but I think you get the idea. Okay, so let's say I drew these nice. And then the log cabin. See, I already have the perspective grid here, so I just follow it pretty mindlessly. I got something a little bit. And obviously you can be more accurate and find out where the center is, and et cetera, et cetera. But actually, you know what? This house is totally the wrong size. Oh, man. So, I just realized, okay, so remember that rule about wherever the horizon line crosses the character, the other character. Do you see how this line crosses this? I'm sorry, I totally screwed up. So, and this is something worth noting. So I'm glad that this happened, because otherwise I wouldn't have talked about it. So the horizon line is crossing this guy here and this guy here, which means that if they were to walk in space into the cabin, they would walk. They would still have to hang their necks on the horizon line. So when they walked over to the cabin, they would be like this to the cabin. Do you see what the problem is? The cabin is inside the ground compared to the characters. So this is where the whole horizon line, vanishing point thing comes in really, really handy. This means that This is completely wrong. The cabin needs to be up here like this. So that if this character was to walk into the cabin, and in fact, this character would have to be even smaller. So this would be the size of the cabin to this character. I want him to be able to walk right across and into the doorway. Which means that all of this stuff is wrong. That's okay, because I have my grid. And all the logs. Follow the perspective. And now I know where to actually where to place the cabin, because I made a tiny little version of the dude. And now this is much more accurate a shot. So I could erase that. This is where the ground plane would be then. And then there's mountains. So we got this grid, so now we know how to place the rocks in here, because we have the ground plane. We said there was rocks. We could have grass following these grid lines. Reinforcing the perspective. We have these clouds that we can have go in perspective, pointing to the log cabin. We have this smoke, and now we have perspective for the smoke. So this is much more accurate now. The cabin is now in the correct place in space compared to the two guys. So now this guy has to raise his arm up to be able to point to the cabin instead of pointing down. Because we checked. And so we made a little man next to that, so that now we know exactly how big the cabin is, how far, and what it looks like in space based on this. And so then we've got this grid here, and then we can take it off or erase it, or if we had it at a different, if we want to do a cleanup line now, we can. But we had the rough that told us generally what we wanted, And then once we figured out all our perspective and all that stuff, we were able to get this right. So we were able to fix and finesse the stuff so that when we're going to do a final drawing, we can do a we could go to as far a finish as we want with just this at this point, you know. If we wanted a better finish, we could look up what a cabin would look like, what the environment would look like, etc., etc. If we could be much more specific, we could solidify these drawings more so that we can, yeah, all that stuff, add a little even more perspective, and etc., etc. So we could be very technical at this point. But the rough, from the very rough idea to then put in the grid, the horizon lines, the vanishing points and the horizon lines, to be able to figure out what our final will eventually look like. This house, it was off. I had it off. I didn't get it in the right spot, but now it is in the right spot. We checked. We shrunk the guy using hanging them in the horizon line to see where, if they were walking in space, where that would be. And now we have this going on still. The background is now doing that. Now if we didn't like that, if we wanted the cabin to be where we had set it, that would be a different story, and we would have to create a different rough in a different position for these guys based off of that. So say we wanted that this cabin, for example, everything being equal, we wanted this cabin here, that a person, that these guys would be here with this cabin here. So we would draw the guy in here first, and then we'd have to match the horizon line to this little guy here in the background. Oops. Okay, so I'm looking at this guy. So this here matches this guy here, but not this guy. So, but let's say that this is what we want, then that means that this guy is off. And because of that, I'm just going to create a different layer. Say this guy then would be lowered down here like that. And that is where he would actually need to be. And then we would recreate this with this guy being there. And I don't know if I like that, because he's stepping on the frame here, and it would make a really lousy it would make a really lousy shot if that happened. If I was to do this, then I would probably have to increase the size of this or move this all up a little bit so that it wouldn't, this kind of tangent of him standing on the frame didn't happen. So, but you see what I mean. You understand what I'm talking about when I'm talking about all this stuff with the grids and why it's useful and helpful. So this topic came up because of my pal Aaron. He asked me about this grid thing because it was he wanted a little visual representation of how the grid works and how it functions. So I thought that I'd do this video so that I could clarify it for him. And I hope that by watching this, you understand what I was trying to say and how to use the grid so that you can create your own. If you don't have a program like Manga Studio, which comes with its own perspective grid. I think Adobe Sketchbook also has its own perspective grid, but Photoshop doesn't. So if whenever I tend to use Photoshop, I create a grid like this. I believe I have one somewhere, but since I don't use Photoshop all that much, I don't know where it is. But yeah, it's really simple to make a grid, and then that's how I use it. I just grab the things and move it around and stuff like that. And yeah, so I hope that has been helpful, and this will speed up your process when trying to work out perspective and solid drawings. Okay, so thanks for watching. And if you've hit a wall when it comes to drawing, if you want to draw what you want to draw rather than what just comes out of you, if you want to get better faster, if you want to start drawing more consistently, if you want your proportions to work, if you want your drawings to be more solid, go over to my Patreon. I give my time to giving you personal training, personal coaching, depending on the tier that you're in. So if you really want to improve, then I highly recommend you take my coaching tier, where we get together, we find out what it is that your goals are, and then I cater a group of lessons and assignments specifically for your needs, and then you send them over back to me once you're done with the assignments, and then I critique them and help you improve and work with you so that you can get over the hump, get over the things that are frustrating you. So if you've hit that wall and you really, really, really want to improve, and you want to do it fast, because really the truth is that you can improve without any coaching at all whatsoever. However, if you want to improve faster, because the best way to get good is to be told exactly what you need to work on from somebody who has been there and gone through it, then I'm here for you. There are positions limited. There's already positions taken up. There's only 5 positions, but once they're filled, then you're going to have to wait. So highly recommend, if you're really into this position, then move fast and get in on it right away. Go to my Patreon. The link is here on the screen, but if you want to, you just press the link on the description of this video, and you will get sent to that specific tier, to my Patreon, so that you can sign up for that personal coaching if you want. And if you're not into necessarily personal coaching, there's other rewards, giveaways, wallpapers, and all kinds of other things that you can take a look at and maybe subscribe to. Plus, you're supporting these videos that I use to answer your questions for free. So thank you for your support. But I just wanted to make you aware of this other thing that I do, so that in case it sounds like something you'd like, you can go ahead and do it. All right. So thanks a lot for everything, and I'll see you next time. All right. Bye.